Welcome back to the Rogue Wave Podcast. Thrilled to be joined by actor Julian Bailey from the hit Amazon Prime show Three Pines. Julian, how's it going?
It's going good, man. Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you. I got to tell you, Hassan and I are big fans of the show. We cover a lot of comic book movies, anything that revolve around pop culture. To see just a whodunit style show was actually, for me personally, just like really refreshing. And your character had some of the biggest scenes throughout the entire season. So talk to us about the Three Pines experience and your personal journey to get there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Well, the Three Pines experience and my journey to get there. Wow. I mean, we could go back to where it all started. I was actually born in Montreal where we shot the show. I mean, of course, we shot in the country as well, about an hour and a half outside of Montreal. But I was born here and moved to Southern California when I was 18 to go to school. Then I started my career in the U.S. after I finished school in Chicago, then went back to L.A. and stayed there pretty much until I came back here for mostly personal reasons. Like my dad was having health issues. So I came back here. And I ended up, finding that there was actually some pretty good work here. So I was going back and forth between here and LA for a few years. And then after, what I should say, right before the pandemic started, I came back here because I got an offer on something. I had been in LA for most of 2019 up to that point. And I came back here to Montreal stuff was good. I had received an offer on something, did another thing. And then the pandemic hit. So I was like, well, I'd probably rather be stuck up here than in LA at this point. So I was kind of not really too mad about that because my apartment here was like a lot nicer. I just had more space.
Well, I mean, look at your chair. I mean, that's amazing right there. I don't know. I'm very jealous.
Yeah, I didn't have this chair at that time though, but yeah, no. So I was just kind of chilling here and like figuring stuff out. And it was a relatively calm year as it was for a lot of people in 2020. And then 2021 came around and it was like proven to be a pretty good year for me. And then I got this audition for this show called Three Pines that was based on these novels by Louise Penny. And I mean, I just loved the material right off the bat. So I put down a self-tape and then didn't hear anything for a while. And then eventually got a call and they wanted to have me read live, on a Zoom or whatever, because they weren't bringing people in because of the pandemic and all that. So I did that, read with them, then got a call after, again, another long wait, and they wanted to see me for a different role. So it was Peter Morrow all along. And so the other role came up and I read for that also on Zoom and didn't hear anything. And then a couple weeks went by and then heard that I was back in the mix for Peter Morrow. But in the middle of all that, just to throw this out there, because it's kind of a sort of funny story, I think before they asked me to read for the other role, I was about to start a movie here, and like the day I was starting the movie, I had this long beard and this hair. My agent calls when I'm in the makeup chair, the hair and makeup chair, and he's like, "Don't cut your hair, don't cut your beard. Like Three Pines likes you. You're in the mix. They love your look, so don't change your look." And I'm literally have like scissors at my head right now. They're about to chop my hair off. So I'm like, "Oh, dude, just hold up. I'm up for a show." It's, and so I talked to producers and they were like, "Oh, that's cool. Like we can work with that." So they kind of split the difference. And then as it turns out, they had me mostly pretty much take the beard off.
I was going to say, right.
Yeah. But they wanted me to keep the hair long. That's why my hair was long. That's pandemic hair right there, Okay. So that
we
was it, man.
When I got up here right now for anybody who's watching this on
yeah,
YouTube
there you go.
right now.
There you go. It's not like my normal style, but yeah, with the pandemic, I was like, man, I don't want to I don't know. I just figured it was a good excuse to grow it out. And but it was a trip, man, because after I had the chemistry read, insofar as you can gauge chemistry over Zoom with Anna Tierney, who plays Clara, I didn't hear anything for and that was about mid-August 2021. I didn't hear anything for 4 or 5 days, which normally, I mean, back in the day in LA, you don't hear anything for a big third or fourth audition. It's dead in the water usually. Yeah. So then it was on a Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from my agent. He's like, "Can I speak to Mr. Peter Morrow, please?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Okay, hang on one second. Let me go get him," And yeah, I was pretty, happy to hear.
If I don't hear from Hassan in a couple of days, I think he's dead. Like I said, cops to his head.
Yes. Well, that's probably because I am.
So we've had actually your co-star Sarah Booth was on with us a few weeks ago, and I asked the same question, but I ask all the actors who made it through the pandemic, and still was working and practicing.
Yeah.
Do you prefer the Zoom or do you prefer the in-person reads to like read the room?
Well, look, no, for a callback, I definitely prefer the room. I would say this though, for a pre-read, I think I prefer a self-tape. But for a callback, when you want to, get a little deeper into the material, I prefer being live in the room for sure. It's tricky with Zoom, man. Sorry?
Is that intimidating or no?
Zoom?
No, being in the room.
I don't find that it is. I'm pretty used to that sort of thing. I've been, in the business for quite a while, so I'm kind of used to that sort of scenario, that situation. I mean, it can be. I'll tell you what can be a little intimidating is when you're testing on a show for studio or for network, which I've done a handful of times, mostly back in the day in LA. And that can be intimidating because let's say you're up for a sitcom, you walking into a room, but you're let in by the casting director who's like announcing you. It's super formal. And there's like, it depends on the setup. But like, for example, at Warner Brothers once, I was up for a show and I was like the only guy they had brought to that point. They had one other dude in mind who ended up getting the part, and they made an offer to him. But I was like, it was like all on me. The guy beforehand that was cast in the lead already was like, dude, this is yours, man. It's in the bag, man. He's like, it's gonna be awesome, dude. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. I'm just trying to like remember my lines and like, stay in character. I'm trying not to think about all that,
Yeah.
But no, they walk you in the room and they're like, ladies and gentlemen, Julian Bailey, and everyone's in a suit. Nobody says anything. And then the head of Warner Brothers stands up and he like shakes your hand. He's like, you're going to do great, kid. And you're like, you're like, yeah, thank you.
I was going to do great.
And it's supposed to be funny, which, hopefully it was, but they're all in suits and everyone's, sitting up in their chairs. And that's one way. So that can be intimidating. But the other way they do it is like theater seating. Like at Fox, I remember it was like theater seating and they're all sort of, just like 4 or 5 rows of kind of, graded seating. Yeah. And they're just sitting there and you got to do this comedic scene. So that can be intimidating. But no, I mean, I like going in the room and being there in person. The Zoom thing is weird because you got to like gauge chemistry and yet you can't even look at the girl you're reading with because you have to establish your eye line and keep that consistent. Wow. So that can be tricky, but you do what you can, you make it work, and it's the age we're living in right now, I guess. So
yeah. I would say so. You say you've been in the business for a long time. I mean, your first film credit is 1991. Your first television credit is 1988, and you are certainly not that old. So
I might be older than you think.
I checked your bio. You're around our ages, so we'll say you're really super young.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'll take it.
Not to incriminate us, but no. But so I mean, you started out at a young age. I mean, what was that experience like? Being, like a child actor essentially, and then kind of coming in.
Well, I was born into a musical family, so I was sort of groomed to be a musician. My mom was a music teacher in England, and she's from London, and I was just raised, really. To be cultured and to like learn about art, like all the arts, but music was really the thing because of my mother. And so she was trying to teach me piano, which if you've ever tried to learn something at a young age, when you're already pretty hyperactive from your mother, that can be tricky because, you feel very comfortable with her. And so you're liable to like, well, let's just say not necessarily sit still. And so they tried putting me with another teacher. And then eventually, I think the classical rigid approach just wasn't for me. And before I had a chance to like learn Suzuki method or something more intuitive or more just by ear, I met a kid at school who was on a Canadian TV show, and I was kind of starstruck because I'd see this guy on TV, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I could do that. Like, I could definitely do that. I could pull that off. So I asked my parents if I could join this children's theater group in town, and they obliged. And so I started doing theater and I loved it. And I was learning like the classics. I was learning like, Shakespeare and, Moliere and, Chekhov and things like that at a pretty young age. and I really enjoyed it. And at some point, they referred me to a dubbing studio in town that was doing a Japanese anime cartoon into English.
Okay.
And I auditioned for that and I got it. And then the dubbing stuff just kind of started. I started just getting offers after that. And around that same time, a casting crew came through different schools in the city looking for 2 kids to cast for the CBC film.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been my first film for the CBC, when it was a Christmas movie. And I was cast as one of the 2 lead boys in that. And then I also, around that same time, did a play with the National Theatre School of Canada. So it was like the voiceover, the film, and the theater just sort of converged like dominoes. And then after that, I deliberately didn't get an agent because I didn't want to, I don't know, I didn't want to have this abnormal, weird childhood. I actually somehow had the presence of mind to think, like, if I really start taking off in my career at this point in time, like, it might interfere with me being able to have a normal childhood. So I was like, I'm just going to do the voiceover stuff. If film stuff comes up, cool. Couple things did, but I never really pursued it hard at that time because I didn't feel like it would be right for me. Then I screwed up my knee playing basketball when I was 13. And so I was like, okay, this is probably it's not going to be in my future to be an athlete, at least not one that's getting paid for it. And yeah. And then I ended up moving to Pasadena, California when I was 18, right after I turned 18 to go to school. So
it's a hard life, being an actor, because you're really, until you get that big break. And for some people it could be several small breaks, but until you actually break through, I mean, you are hustling at a day job and then kind of running off to do auditions and things like that. I mean, was that the experience you had, or did you kind of, I mean, again, you have a really impressive filmography, so it seems like maybe you found some early success, but what was it like mentally to go through that?
That's a great question. I mean, I'll tell you straight up, like, yeah, it was really difficult, but I think what would have been more difficult for me was having regret, or would have been having regrets. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just knew I had to go in this general direction. I didn't know how everything would work out, but, like, try to make a long story short, basically, having had pretty easy success early on, I just had a lot of confidence that things would work out somehow. So when I finished school, I was actually invited to do this 3rd-year company thing, which was like a privilege, but something in me was like, you need to go to Chicago, because an old mentor of mine had been telling me about Chicago theater and this whole, this really cool scene they had out there. And I just had it in my head that Chicago was a place I needed to go to, like, cut my teeth early on.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on a Greyhound. I was living in Calabasas, California at the time, and at my girlfriend's dad's house, and really, really nice spot. But it just, I wasn't comfortable because I couldn't envision myself like playing it safe at that point. I was 20, I guess. And so I got on a Greyhound bus and went to Chicago, slept in the Greyhound station the first night. And then the next morning I was walking up the street to try to see what was out there. I probably had all of $30 in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought, I got to do something. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but that's what I did. And then this dude saw me walking. He's smoking a cigarette. He beelines across the street to me, throws a cigarette down, stomps it out. And he goes, "Hey, kid." He goes, "You need a job?" And I was like, yeah, actually I do, And so he
That's
gave
always
me a
dangerous,
job.
by the way.
Yeah, it was. But he gave me a job as a bike messenger in the Loop, if you're familiar with Chicago, sort of
Wow.
the
Okay. Yeah.
downtown core area. So I was, I didn't have any place to stay, but he was like, "There's this kid that's working for us who has he might have some room for you in his place." So it turns out I met that kid, and he was like, "It's not exactly Paradise Island, but it's not exactly the ghetto." Well, it was the ghetto. And my room was really just a large closet. There were literally cockroaches climbing on me at night, dudes from the neighborhood smoking blunts on the windowsill. And I was just like, why did I leave Calabasas to come here to do this? Then we got evicted because the dude wasn't giving the rent money to the landlord. So we got evicted. Then I was basically homeless. And one night I slept by the Chicago River, by an impound lot across the river, right across from the Doubletree Hotel, under a little tree, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day I went through Backstage West, found an audition, which I would do, find auditions, go bring my 2 monologues on audition. And I found an audition for something, and met the producer, who was temping as a secretary in the financial district. And she was like, "Where are you living right now?" And I was like, I'm kind of, sorting that out.
Paradise Island.
Yeah. But at that point, that was over. That ghetto place was over. And so she introduced me to this guy that, like, took me in for like 2 weeks. He was a former heroin addict. And he lived in Lincoln Park, and I was like, wow, this is a nice part of Chicago. And and then after that, man, like, well, my girlfriend at the time ended up breaking up with me, and somehow right after she broke up with me, I booked 2 things in a row, and I ended up getting my SAG card. Did a movie with Lou Rawls and Judge Reinhold and John Aston, and then
she cashed
had
out
my
too
SAG
soon.
card. Yeah, and then yeah, Addams Family, and then Beverly Hills Cop, Judge Reinhold.
Yeah.
And then ended up going back to LA, but I had made a contact with a great theater group in Evanston. I know this is kind of not really a long story short.
No.
But...
Look, let me tell you right now. You have the best
story
setup
I've ever heard.
You have the best setup of any guest we've ever had, and right now your rogue journey, this whole thing, that's you're in first place right now.
Thanks, man. Well, I'll just say this real quick too. When I got back to LA, I ended up having to sleep in my car for a long time. I was sleeping in my car mostly in Burbank and the Hollywood Hills. Then I met a lady who ran a business in West Hollywood, and of course there was no one there at night, so she let me stay there. Ended up staying there for nearly 2 years. I would have to leave early in the morning before, start of the business day. And then, and then started doing stand-up at the Comedy Store, and was seen by a literary agent who brought me in. And that's when stuff started to move for me. But there was lots of ebbs and flows, like ups and downs, from that time where there was all this heat on me when I was like in my early to mid 20s, where you feel like the wheels fall off. And then next thing you know, like you're back, you're kind of back to square one. Like you test on a show like that. I was driving a Geo Metro that was white with a green door that eventually wouldn't open. So I'd have to do this like Dukes of Hazzard, jump out of the window. Seriously, I'd go to I ended up getting cast on a Lifetime show, Television for Women is what they called it back then. And I don't think they call it that anymore. But at the after party, like for the rap party, I pulled up in my Geo Metro. I don't know why I didn't buy a new car. Ended up leaving that little weird setup in West Hollywood, moved to Reseda, and I lived next to an insomniac rooster who was just waking everybody up in the neighborhood like 2-3 o'clock. He couldn't figure out what time it was, I guess. But yeah, so I pull up to the rap party, and the valet's trying to open my door. I'm like, no, it doesn't open. Like, you gotta. And if I recall too, I had to roll the window down with a wrench because the handle was broken. And I'm like climbing out of the window. People are like, weren't you on that show? Didn't you do like 12 episodes? I was like, yeah, but I'm trying to, be prudent with my money.
Yeah.
So then my car blew up.
Saving on gas. I'm saving on gas.
Yeah. Saving
you want to
on
end
gas.
up back in Paradise Island. I mean, that you gotta be frugal.
No, but for real though, like, and being Canadian too, in the US on a limited work permit, like I wasn't really supposed to like just go get a job at Blockbuster Video or something. Like it had to be an acting job. So anything I was doing just to survive, I was, had to be like kind of, cash jobs or whatever, a little bit here and there. So I was selling salads and sandwiches out of a, portable cooler for a while too in West Hollywood and Beverly Hills at hair salons. And yeah, man. I mean, when it got really, really rough was probably like summer of 2006.
Wait, that's not even the really rough part. Okay, go ahead.
No, not even close. Not even close, man. No, not even close. No, I ended up, dude, honestly, just to put gas in my tank, man. I remember I would like be going, I was in Van Nuys Park going through, trying to find plastic water bottles to recycle to be able to eat something and put gas in my tank. And this homeless guy one time came up to me. He was like, hey man, he's like, I feel like God told me to give you this, and he gives me $5. And I was like, wow. But I mean, that's having had like a certain degree of success already under my belt. So I was really like, everyone's like, go back to Canada. Like, what are you doing? And I was like, man, I've been here since I was 18. Like LA is home for me. And I just believed I was supposed to stay. So that's the best I can do to make it short as far as that little chapter.
And then it turns out you go back to Canada and you land one of the biggest roles of your career.
Dude, yeah, really weird, right? I mean, really kind of, I guess, poetic in a way, but yeah, that's kind of how it ended up happening, man. It was a trip. So yeah.
Do you want to host a podcast, Hassan? We're both fired, by the way. Like, I don't know
absolutely.
how it happened, but like through the course of this interview, this is now Julian's show.
Yeah, sorry guys, I talked too much, man.
I mean,
yeah,
it's back to the.
Well, I was telling someone recently, like doing more of these interviews lately, I was like, man, it's a skill to be able to answer a question like succinctly enough, but get all the information in there. And I'm not even close to being there. As far as figuring that out. We prefer your
answer.
Yeah, don't worry about it, man.
This is a podcast, so
yeah. But yeah, no, I appreciate that though. But yeah, I'm definitely learning how to be more succinct. But that's basically the story, man. I could tell you guys like so many stories, man. Seriously.
Look, I don't even, like I said, I don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
we're
gonna work out a book deal for you.
Yeah, really.
Dude, let's talk about that. Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of interviewing many famous folks and people who've been in movies and music, especially. The people that give you nothing are the worst interviews. I interviewed a band called Gym Class Heroes. I don't know if you're a fan of them at all.
I have heard of them. Yeah, have heard of them. Yeah,
totally great guys, totally great band, whatever. But man, I would ask them a question, and I'd be like, I'm like, what do you? Oh, your new album's dropping. What tracks do you think is going to be great? He's like, I like track 3. And I'd be like, all right, I got nothing. Like I remember there was literally one of those like scratching nails on a chalkboard kind of interviews because I'm trying to like. Okay. So talk to me, you have a lot of influences. Are there a lot of influences on this record? Yeah. A lot of them.
Have you guys ever seen the interview with Billy Bob Thornton and his band and that Canadian radio host, John Gomeshi?
No.
Oh, you got to watch it. You got to watch Billy Bob Thornton. And I believe his name is Jan Gomeshi. But that guy actually ended up getting into some trouble because of some allegations and all that. And
Billy Bob Thornton or John?
No, the other dude, the host.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty serious stuff actually. So he kind of got canceled or whatever. But no, Billy Bob Thornton and his band. I mean, you could just see Billy Bob was like, I didn't really know Billy Bob, but I had met him because a very good friend of mine was working at the label that his band was signed to. But if you watch this interview, man, it's kind of hilarious because he doesn't like to have his musical career diminished at all by his fame as an actor.
Sure.
And you can just tell the way the guy was asking him questions about, movies and things of that nature. He was just like boiling under the surface. And at one point, he said something that was kind of a bit of a diss against Canada. And Jan Gomeshi was like, so how do you like Canada? How's it touring in Canada? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, it's kind of like America, but not really. He's like, in what way do you mean? He's like, well, kind of like mashed potatoes without the gravy. And I'm probably not doing it justice, but you just got to watch the interview, man.
I'm definitely going to watch that. I think that's amazing. But it's funny you bring up that point though, because we've had the Bacon brothers on, right? So Kevin Bacon and his brother, and I always make it a point because I'm sitting there like they're on to promote their record. So I try to get as many musical questions. Like I front load the musical questions because I want them to feel as if, they're here. And especially, Kevin Bacon being, the more recognizable Bacon, even though his brother is like an Emmy winner too. I mean, he's an Emmy winning composer. I mean, he's got an impressive resume as well too, but obviously people know who Kevin Bacon is. Right. But I always made it sure to be like, equitable with my questions, making sure that, both brothers got to say something. Cause I would just, I would hate to have I'd hate to have the mashed potatoes without the gravy.
Oh man, that was such a hard diss, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I know what he means, but I kind of do know what he means, but I don't know. I mean, mashed potatoes are great, man, especially with some cheese in them, but the gravy can be a little fattening, I guess, but I don't know, man. I know what he means somehow, having lived kind of equal parts of my life in both countries, but that's not a diss against Canada. I love Canada.
No, Canada's a lot of fun. Montreal is a fun town.
Montreal definitely does not qualify for that analogy. Like Montreal is not mashed potatoes without the gravy for sure. I would say out of all the cities in Canada, it's the most fun city, I would say.
Now it's funny because my mom listens to my show. She's very good every week. She listens to the show. She critiques Hassan too when she thinks he's too harsh on me. But we went out. My wife and I. She wasn't my wife at the time. We went to Montreal in 2011 to go see Pearl Jam, and we went with a friend of ours. And then the minute we stepped foot on the ground, some guy in this big white puffy coat comes right up to our friend, and he's like, "Give me all your money." And we're like, "What the heck?" We're like, "Holy crap!" And it turns out. He turns around, they give each other a big hug. That was his drug dealer. It was his drug dealer. It was my friend's drug dealer. And he ended up showing us around. So like everyone in Canada is just so nice. He's like, you guys haven't been here before? I'm taking you all the great places. And he did. He took us to all, it was his weed dealer. I mean, nothing, we call him drug dealer, but whatever. It was nothing crazy. Him and his girlfriend took us around all the best spots in Montreal to go. We had such a great time. So it doesn't matter who you are. Canada's the nicest place on the planet.
He got you guys to give all your money to everyone else.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was quite the experience. It was definitely quite the experience.
It wasn't a robbery, it was extortion.
Well, no, look, I'm telling you, it was
extortion.
That was a fun week. That was pre-kids. We could do that. So getting back to Three Pines for a second too, talking about your character specifically. I remember it's funny that the casting director, you said that you had this look, right? Like you had the look, right?
That's what they said. Yeah.
I remember watching the first 2 episodes, and your presence in the first 2 episodes, you weren't in a ton of scenes, but every time you were in a scene, there felt like a gravity to it, like a weight to it, like something's going on. And then it completely, to me, contrasts the next 2 episodes where you're the main focal point, your family's the main focal point. Or was it episode 5 and 6? I forget which order it was, but when it was your main focal point, you're almost kind of like, you're this tortured artist in the first 2 episodes, and you give off this, like, you really do kind of like, steal the room with that performance, but then you get to be kind of goofy and petulant and the complete polar opposite when it shines on like who you are as a family. Now, take us through that experience, because I thought that was the thing that stood out to me.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Thank you for picking that up. You don't know all the time if people are going to pick up little nuances or things that you're doing as an actor, ways that you're approaching the role, choices and things like that. But yeah, no, that's true, man. I mean, right off the bat, like, people think my character is such a jerk and all this kind of stuff because they see him being this sort of insecure
artist. You're tortured. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. Like, come on, give a guy a break. But yeah, they think of him as this jerk or whatever. My thing has always been like, for one thing, as an actor, to never judge a character, but just to be like, understanding of who this person is, as a result of their conditioning and their upbringing and so forth. So I think we get to see a bit more of why he is the way he is, particularly in 5 and 6. I don't think that's giving anything away, but
no.
But yeah, I mean, just when you get to see his family and where he's coming from, and just the control, the kind of dominating presence that like his mother has over him, and evidently that his father did too.
Mm-hmm.
And just everything that did to him, and the brokenness, if you will, of this dude. Then I think hopefully people have a little bit more understanding or empathy for why he is the way that he is. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you picked that up, and I hope other people could see that he's not really that much of a jerk.
No,
well,
there was.
But there's a
you mentioned in episode 5 and 6. There's two scenes in particular that I thought were really amazing. Was just the one where you're actually fighting with your brother and you kind of like steal his prized possession and run off. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, that's what I mean, I don't have a brother, but I have a sister, so yeah. I mean, there's always that underlying, but it's such a childish thing to do, but it doesn't matter how old you are, because it's your sibling. That's just what you do. Like, you regress to these childhood moments. I thought that was amazing, but then it was very cathartic at the end. No spoilers, but when you're actually kind of reconciling with him as well, and it makes it even more touching, and it made it more real.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a great observation, man. I agree.
I got the job back, Hassan. I'm back on board.
Good job, man. Yeah, but no, I agree, man. And I think that was important to show that degree of reconciliation was important. And yeah, I mean, one thing I've said about this show, is that it really deals with a lot of human issues, really human issues. So even if someone can't relate necessarily with like growing up in like a lot of privilege, with really emotionally cold parents, I think in other ways we can all relate with the idea of feeling not seen, not heard, and in that sense kind of neglected or rejected. I don't know anybody who hasn't dealt with that to some degree. And I think if you haven't yet, you will at some point. If you're going for it in life, if you're gonna really shoot for the stars, you're gonna take some knocks. And I don't think it's a good idea to try to raise kids like with this idea of keeping them in this safe space all the time, because it's just not reality, So that's one thing that I loved about the show, is just how they didn't shy away from allowing the vulnerability of the human condition, if you will, to be shown.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I have a young son, and if he's telling me half the stories you told me about how you were when you were a kid, I'm going to be terrified for him. I'll be terrified for him.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this too. My dad, like, I think he was aware, probably not fully at the time, but he was aware to a degree of what I was going through. But he had such a crazy childhood and a crazy life that I think he kind of appreciated the fact that I was putting myself more or less in these difficult situations, because I think he thought I probably needed it. But every once in a while, my mom, who wasn't making a lot of money, I mean, she was like teaching piano, on the side, like a few times a week. She'd send me like $100 here and there, and I would get this check like in the mail right at the right time. I'd be like, oh, thank God, like I can graduate to like albacore tuna as opposed to like whatever the other kind is, the the really watery thin kind. Or I can buy a can opener to actually get into the tuna. But yeah, man, no, it's you do what you can. At one point too, I was doing parties for kids on the weekend dressed up like Pikachu or a Teletubby or
you'd be welcome in my house now. I mean, you'd be welcome before that, but I mean, I'm telling you, my kids would actually be like, wow, great, come on in.
Yeah. But I did that for a while, and I got stories to burn on that.
Holy cow!
From the book.
I know.
Yeah,
right.
I guess so, man.
Should be get the audio transcript here, and then you get it rolling for that.
Yeah, I really do, man. Thanks.
So real quick, this is we have our rule: don't get fired. Don't say anything that will get you fired. Okay, but what's the future of Three Pines? What's
Well, as far as that, I mean, just like straight up, I can't say because I don't know yet. Like we haven't received any official word about 2 yet.
Okay.
I said to someone the other day, like, there's so much in this business that you can't control, but I really feel like we left it all out there on the floor. Like
absolutely,
we did everything we could to bring something that was really like heart and soul, and we feel like people responded quite well to it. I mean, we were number 1 on Amazon in like 5 countries for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Then we got bumped by Jack Ryan, which was sort of to be expected. And and then what else was I going to say? I think we're still in like the top 5 or 6 in most of those countries: Australia, Ireland, the US, Canada, and the UK. So based on the numbers, at least relatively early numbers, a couple months in or a month and a half in, I think it looks pretty good. But, I've tried to learn not to get too high or too low, and just to kind of, glide at an even keel, because there's so much that's not in my control. So, fingers crossed, and we're hoping for a season 2. And I think people won't be disappointed by what we bring if we do get that green light. But if not, just keep on swinging, keep on trucking, and hopefully have a chance to keep, doing some cool stuff. But I mean, I'm not going to lie, man. I hope we do.
Yeah. Well, we're pulling for you. I mean, we're absolutely pulling for you. I would love to see season 2. It ends on I call it a Sopranos like cliffhanger. So there, if it ended there, I would have to make up my own ending kind of thing. But
Well, dude, there are like I think 18 or 19 books or something like that at this point. Because the latest one just came out like a month ago or something, and Louise was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list like right off the bat. So, I mean, there's a lot of material to cover. We covered basically 4 books in the first season, so there's a lot of material to cover. And like Alfred Molina is just amazing, and he's totally behind the project. And Left Bank, who produced The Crown, have been amazing. And man, I mean, just like an incredible team of people from like basically covering the United Kingdom, Canada, and the US. Like it's a great joint effort, and we feel really blessed and fortunate, man, for sure.
Julian Bailey, Three Pines. I don't even think I have to ask the question whether or not he qualifies as a true rogue. I mean, holy cow, what a journey, what an amazing story, and we are thrilled for your success, and we hope it continues.
Yeah, same. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on.
When we come back, more Rogue Wav Podcast. Hi guys, Mike Dolce here from the Rogue Wav Podcast. If you like this video, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. It really helps us out. Leave a comment, let us know what you'd like to see in future episodes, and tune in every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, for a brand new episode of the Rogue Wav Podcast.